All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. So I dug up a very good one for everybody tonight. I think most people probably have never heard of this document, so I'll try to keep it a bit ambiguous, and I won't say too much from it, like certain key things from it. I'll help keep the document ambiguous. Let's put it that way. So I will censor some things out where I think it might be necessary to do, but on the vast whole, I'm just going to read from the document. So, in an effort to help protect the document. Okay, so this is actually tied to Majestic 12. And even though the famous Majestic 12 documents are actually a hoax, even the FBI did an investigation and it's on their website. They decreed it's bogus. But even within the UFO community and even with whistleblowers like Richard Doty, it's pretty much established that the Majestic 12 documents were a hoax. So as cool as they seemed, they're just a hoax. But these documents here, but it's always been alleged that Majestic 12 is real and all of that, just that those documents were a hoax. It's also been alleged that even though those documents are a hoax, that they contained some truths or half truths. So, anyways, the documents I'm going to read from today are related to Majestic 12, but they are not those Majestic 12 documents. These documents here, I won't say too much, but they're from the 1950s. Okay, these documents look far more authentic than the Majestic 12 documents. Okay, so and they admit some pretty amazing things. I learned a few things that I didn't know before from these reports. And whilst these reports here actually give a good, they go through a lot of items and things that most people in UFO lore already know. They do add these document. This document does add a few extra things, like even I didn't know, and it made me really consider that these documents are probably bona fide authentic because these are revelations I've never heard mentioned or discussed before, like with all the big shots in UFOlogy, with all the people who talk in these topics, all the whistleblowers, everybody from biggest to smallest, from left to right. I've never heard some of these things said before. Okay, one in particular, I won't ruin the surprise by saying it now. It's got to do with the biological makeup of the beings. So that to me was astonishing. So that shows me that this document here might be authentic. I won't say how I got it. I didn't do it through any nefarious or illegal or shady means whatsoever. Okay, not at all. Okay, but it leads me to believe that this document is authentic, right? It's pretty cool. I won't ruin the surprise. So let's get started, right? So the title page is very interesting. It's got the stamp of Magi on it. I won't say too much of the super important names and code numbers and all of that, just to keep everything more ambiguous, right? To help protect the document. So it does say here, not for public inspection, but this is probably outdated now. But I don't want to read too much from these title pages. Let's see. I'll read this here. Article 1 says Purpose. The aforementioned panel, under the direct presidential directive signed on 26 September 1947, has been tasked with the responsibility of providing answers to a most troublesome and disturbing phenomenon, that of otherworld visitation, and what it, some of these words are hard to read because the document's so old, and what it portends for the human family. It is in this vein that the panel has addressed the problem and is providing possible answers. So there's quite a few sections of this document. It's quite a big document that I want to read from. So I'm going to be reading from the following subchapters, which are current studies of otherworld. This is Article 3, Conclusions. It says, point 1, current studies of otherworld visitation are in 3 phases. A, technology exploitation. This means humans exploiting the technology that they've gleaned. B is interplanetary travel, and C is cultural communication. I'll read portions of this one here. I don't want to read too much of the sensitive stuff. So on point 2, it says, on 19th of September 1947, the IAC, the BEEP, and the BEEP reviewed a top secret intelligence report titled Report to the President 1947, BEEP, Magic Eyes Only, and I'll beep out the rest there. The report mentions in compliance with your directive of 9th of July 1947, this is referencing Roswell. The attached report on flying saucers is respectfully submitted. In consonance with your instructions, advisors from State, Treasury, War, and Navy departments assisted on a 2-month exploratory mission concerning the reality of otherworld visitation. The principal investigators and storage areas were visited. Successful efforts were made to reach scientists of all levels as measured in their work in classified defense projects. Remember, this is 1947, 1950-ish, right? So conferences were held with national security officials and leaders of private industry. And I'll skip out the rest of that there. And it says, and recommendations, can't read that word, to the sound courses of action for formulating plans and policies in light of recent developments, right? So they made this document, they did this investigation, study, whatever you call it, to help, in light of the things that happened at Roswell, essentially. This is like their defense strategy, their little planning strategy type document. They did a study and how they could best react to this situation and what implications there could be. They looked at the facts from the crashes and the information they've gained, and it's like a little briefing, right? So that's basically the gist of this document. So let's see. I could skip over reading all of this stuff here. I'll just get to the interesting parts, which will start in technology. So, like I mentioned earlier, I would read from the sections. This is one of those subchapters. So, D, technology. At present, the ability to reconstruct the technology that is from the crashes, they may be eons ahead of us. The best to our current efforts would be incalculable. Areas such as aircraft and missile design would benefit only after working understanding has been achieved. Weapons sciences will follow. E. I'll skip that. It's about nuclear stuff. I'll read this one because it pertains to something I never knew that was mentioned later here. Article F, biological warfare. Uh, I'll bleep that last part out. Programs in blah, 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 just bleeping that out, are in field test stages. Discovery of new beep and bacteria agents so lethal that serums derived by genetic research can launch medical science into unheard of fields of biology. The samples extracted from bodies found in New Mexico have yielded new strains of a beep not totally understood, but give promises of the ultimate beep. The danger lies in the spread of airborne and bloodborne outbursts of beep in large populations with no medical cures available. Article G, genetic and pharmaceutical development programs. Current research in beep can be accelerated when studies are complete. Understanding the human makeup through EBE research will bring a varied wealth of information in how cells replicate themselves and may help in developing new drugs and markets. I think this is because they can heal themselves, allegedly. Or they heal very rapidly, the beings. But anyways, healthcare industries are considered the best, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Uh, Article H, new materials development. Conclusions reached by the BEEP in 1948 upon the something examination of the material structure of, I don't know. That must be a location of a crash site or something I've never heard of, or a base. So I'll just leave that one out. I've never even heard of that one before in all my research. Never heard these names. So I'll just skip them out. Compelled the Air Force to launch a new machine ability research program. Samples tested and evaluated by the BLA suggested that future materials would have to incorporate new alloys and composites if space exploration and hypersonic dynamics are to be achieved. As a result, new machining techniques are underway for high temperature alloys and titanium. I'll skip this one over. This one here mentions something interesting. In Article J, nuclear propulsion development programs. The BLEEP and BLEEP are currently conducting research for advanced technologies in atomic engines and radical propulsion studies. System studies at Los Alamos, New Mexico, BLEEP, I won't mention the next place, and at Langley I'll just mention the places people have heard of because I don't want to say something that is kind of secret still and then, have any problems, right? So bleep that one out. And Langley are attempting to duplicate the water drive and plastic core elements found on the engine being kept at blah. Integration of hydrogen-based fuels and electrohydrodynamic technology may open up for us development of super aero, I don't know that word, with Mach 5 capabilities. Oh, aerodynes with Mach 5 capabilities. So that would be like over 3,000 miles an hour. So, should I read this one? Yeah. Article K, Intelligence Gathering and Analysis. Based on what is known of the technology and intelligence of the visitors, it is fairly certain that there will be other sightings and encounters of a spectacular nature. As to purpose and modus operandi, we are not certain, but it is clear that if these visitors had conquest in mind, it would not be difficult for them, given their ability to penetrate our airspace at will, and their ability to jam radio, telephone, television, and teletype transmission, let alone power grids. So far, reports and sightings are blatant and deliberate, thus allowing our intelligence agencies to gather good data. As to the analyses of such reports, only a continuous wave of sightings and encounters worldwide would provide enough data for a clear understanding of intent. Well, it's been about 70 years since this report was written, so they've had a lot more time to study it. Um, I'll skip that little section out. It's probably a bit special and sensitive. Let's see this one here. I'll skip these all out. And here, I'm going to read from Appendix A. This is the most interesting stuff. So let's see how many people are watching. Okay, so you're in for some interesting stuff here. No, sorry, not Appendix, Annex A. Number one from Annex A. Here's the juicy stuff. The panel's review of the beep and beep investigation of Site I3, never heard of that, and the Air Force Site I2, I think it says, has led the panel to conclude that the objects under, I believe these are the two Roswell crashes, the two famous ones, right? That all the big shots in UFOlogy talk about, even Richard Doty, right? So I've just never heard these terminologies for the locations before, right? But I'll bleep out other stuff that I think might be too important, right? The panel's review of the bleep and bleep investigation of Site I3 and the Air Force Site I2 have led the panel to conclude that the objects under study are the result of a high altitude ejections of an escape cylinder from a fatal mid-air collision of the unidentified circular planiform aircraft of interplanetary nature. So this report has actually provided a detail that I have never heard in all my years of study. This is one of the things in all my years of research, and it's that the UFO actually crashed with another vehicle, right? I don't know if it was a human craft or what, but it crashed into another aerial vehicle. Okay, and that it was actually an escape cylinder that landed on the ground. That's pretty interesting. Not denying that maybe the craft crashed elsewhere, right? But that also might be why there are two crash sites. But I've never heard that element before. And that just to me makes this more credible, right? And bona fide. Um, so that's pretty interesting, right? But the other thing is it actually mentions Project Mogul here. And this document's from the 50s. Okay? So Project Mogul was the Air Force's excuse for the Roswell crash not being aliens. They said, oh, it's just the Mogul balloons. This document actually says the Mogul balloons were in operation at the time of the Roswell crash and detected the Roswell crash. That's an astronomical element added to the story, right? But anyways, let's get to it. So they said it was the panel's review of bleep and bleep investigation of the sites. I'll bleep those out now. Has led to the panel to conclude that the objects under study are the result of a high altitude ejections of an escape cylinder from a fatal mid-air collision of the unidentified circular planiform aircraft of interplanetary nature. Of particular interest to the panel was Site I2, located at bleep bleep. Oh wow, it's got the whole shebang right there. So I'll definitely bleep that out, as this site yielded the most material for analysis. Site I2 may be closely associated with Site. Oh, it's a third one I've never heard of, so I'll just bleep that one out. Due to the similarity of material recovered and that the impact of Site bleep and debris patterns suggests that the craft hit the ground at a sharp angle and continued to remain airborne until coming to rest at Site I2. The craft found at Site I2 is either the remains of a rocket plane or a powered glider. What remained of the power plant was examined and determined to be of magnetic drive propulsion, powered by a fusion reactor of sorts. Lack of wiring, fuel systems, cables, motors, hydraulics, intakes, exhausts, and surface controls strongly suggested the craft was designed to travel outside of our atmosphere. The second craft that impacted at Site I3, so it does say there are two craft, or maybe one was the escape vessel, whatever. But I'll have to review this afterwards. I'm just reading it right now. The second craft that impacted at Site I3 provided very little evidence provided very little evidence that it too was similar in design. That's what it says. Provided very little evidence that it too was similar in design, as the impact was vertical in nature and at very high speed. It is believed that the debris discovered on 2nd July 1947 by a local rancher was the result of a midair collision with an X-plane from Bleep, another unidentified object, or possibly collided with both. Radar film and tower logs do not explain the merging of three radar targets prior to collisions and subsequent crashes. Next point, there were 5 recovered bodies, 2 of which were found in a severely damaged escape cylinder, and the remaining 3 were found some distance from the cylinder. All 5 appeared to have suffered from sudden decompression and heat suffocation. Recovery of autopsies of the occupants are covered in detail in a separate study, Bleep, within projects Bleep and Bleep. I've never heard these terms and names before, right? This is pretty cool. And then I'll bleep out that whole thing as well, as a result of damage sustained from unknown causes. So I've heard all those details about the occupants and how they died vaguely. This provides a little bit more detail with, sudden decompression and heat suffocation. I never heard that detail, but I heard everything else before, right? I've never heard these certain project names and stuff, so I'll just bleep that out. Then the next point is the panel was concerned over the contamination of several beep personnel upon coming in contact with debris near the power plant. Now, the interesting thing is that I was just saying the other day in a video on this topic, okay, that I had heard from different documents and whistleblowers that members of the initial team who attended one of the crash sites, when they saw the beings who are rumored to be the tall grays, that because they looked mantis-like in their state after the crash, maybe because of decomposition or just whatever they look like after the crash, and maybe decompression, like it says in all this, right? Maybe that alter what they look like. But they looked so abnormal that allegedly, according to the stories, members of the crew died from shock and even from, they took their lives at some point afterwards, right? Something along those lines. But this report here, which is actually a far more credible report. This one here provides an alternate explanation for why there were such sudden deaths on that recovery team. Check this out. This is mind-blowing. It says the panel was concerned over the contamination of several beep personnel upon coming in contact with debris near the power plant. One technician was overcome and collapsed when he attempted the removal of a body. Another medical technician went into a coma 4 hours after placing a body in a rubber body bag. All 4 were rushed to Los Alamos for observation. All 4 later died of seizures and profuse bleeding. All 4 were wearing protective suits when they came in contact with body fluids from the occupants. That's a super, super serious thing to be right there in print, right? I've never seen anything like that in all my years of research. So anyways, point 9, autopsies on the 4 dead beep technicians are not yet conclusive. It is believed that the 4 may have suffered from some form of toxin or a highly contagious disease. Tissue samples are currently being kept at beep. Now, I've never heard that place mentioned before, that facility. So, this document is looking pretty interesting. So I'm just being respectful and safe and bleeping out stuff I think should be right. So, anyways, I didn't come across this document by any shady methods, right? Nothing at all, right? So, anyways, it says the panel was also concerned. This is just so cool. That's why I'm smiling. Like, I love this stuff. I would love to work in this field, right? I would love to work in this field and this be my job, right? Investigating these things, dealing with this. But anyways, the panel was also concerned with the detection of airborne release of radiation over the state of New Mexico. This is an element I've never heard before. It says Beep detachment from Beep Air Force Base has conducted several airborne monitor flights over Site Beep I-2, the site mentioned before of the crash. Radiation readings indicate a high neutron count was recorded on plane as the plane flew over the site. Neutron count dropped off as the plane flew a considerable distance from the site. A report has been filed with the Beep. Detection of high altitude explosion was recorded by a Project Mogul constant level balloon on the 4th of July, 1947. That's astronomical, man. That is astronomical. It says radar from White Sands Proving Ground and Beep also detected a surge. There you go. Next point, parachute recovery from Beep were dispatched to Site I-2. Upon arrival, the team, realizing the nature of the crash, radioed instructions and marked the crash site for investigators that arrived later. In the opinion of the senior Beep medical officer, current medical equipment and supplies are wholly inadequate for dealing with a large-scale outbreak of the alien Beep. That's all I'm going to say. Facilitation at Los Alamos and Bleep are considered as lacking in the current climate. On 26th of September 1947, the first meeting of Beep was held to discuss the New Mexico incidents and how to implement the policy established by MJ-12 Bleep. So that's the interesting stuff. I already read the rest of the document. That's only partway through the document. This stuff here, is not really as interesting as that. So it's more like, I don't want to say political stuff, but just like they're talking about all their office level stuff. Um, I'm just making sure I'm not going to miss anything out before I end this. Yeah, so that's that. So that's got to be one of the best and the most interesting, incredible sounding documents that I've ever read. And I really, I honestly did not get it through any shady means. But I also at the same time don't want to say too much about it because, if we're blessed and it's just attainable where it was, then, I want to help keep it ambiguous. You know what I mean? People like me, I just love the topic so much. I have a passion for it. I just find it interesting. You know what I mean? And I'm not an important person. I'm not going to cause any change or anything like that there. I just love knowing these things. So, but anyways, that's a very interesting document, and that's all I can say. So, anyways, folks, I just wanted to treat everybody to that one there. That's pretty cool stuff. So, anyways, I can assure everybody, I didn't do anything shady to find this document. I've never heard it before. I've never heard of a lot of things I've seen in this document. Oh, there's something I didn't read from it. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. There's something that I missed from that. There's one of the most important points. Hold on. I'm glad I didn't end the stream yet. There's one of the most important points from the document. I don't know how I missed that. Bear with me. Um, oh, maybe it's because it was in some of the first pages that I skipped over. Yeah, that could be why. Um, yeah, that's why. It was on one of the first pages that I skipped over too quickly. So here we go. It says here, uh, point 4, consensus reached by members of the panel that until positive proof that the Russians did not attempt a series of reconnaissance flights over our most secure installations, the sightings and recovered objects are interplanetary in nature. Point 5, this is one of the most interesting things that I've never heard in all my 20 plus years of research. It says the occupants of these planiform vehicles are, in most respects, human or human like. Autopsies so far indicate that these beings share the same biological, and I can't read that word, as humans. I don't know if it says, like, it looks like it says Noeis. I don't know if it says basis and it's just the way it's been copied, but they share the same biological basis or something as humans. It says they're human or human like. Now, I don't know if that was just their term in the 50s for humanoid, like having humanoid body shape. I don't know if they're making these statements before they did the autopsies. No, it says autopsies so far indicate that these beings share the same biological something as humans. That's astounding. I mean, that is astounding. I have never heard that. In all the things I've heard, and I'm pretty sure that even Mr. Doty describes these beings as being the Greys. Okay? And Greys are not like humans. So this is the only document that I've heard that mentions these other place names, these other project names that I bleeped out in this stream here for good reason, and these certain elements that I'd never heard before, right? And this is one of them, right? That's astronomical, right? That is so cool that the beings looked a lot like us. It makes me wonder that autopsy video, there's a few autopsy videos out there. To me, they all are obviously fake except for one. And I'm not certain if it's the Santilli video. Doty says the Santilli video is fake, according to UFO lore and all the deepest research. Santilli came out after a while and said that it was fake, but he couldn't pressure to saying that. But even when he made that statement, he said still a portion, like 5 to 15% of it, is from the original, but it was faithfully recreated because the original had been lost, right? So it sounds kind of ridiculous, but I believe that's a real video. The one I've seen looks so real. I don't know why anybody will go so far to fake it. That you could see the entire autopsy and the layers of tissue and flesh and like just every detail. They take the eye apart, for heaven's sake. They cut it open and take the organs out. I mean, it's so gory and just so real. And I'm sorry, it does not look faked, right? Um, and I've heard people say that the phone in the video didn't come out till years later. Well, in the military, they had those phones at the time. I researched that a long time ago and proved that to be real. So that could be real. Maybe Mr. Doty and others have to pass it off as being fake for certain reasons. But at the end of the day, my gut instinct that autopsy is real just because of how real it looks, right? And in that autopsy, it wasn't the stereotypical gray, the one that looks more alien like. It was one that looked more humanish or elf like, right? It looked quite human in the face, but just had like a larger head. And, these are one of the well known types of extraterrestrials that everybody's talked about. And for lack of a better term, they're just more human like in the face and they just look more elf like. They're smaller, more petite, but they have really huge heads. They're, more refined, on the, not saying beautiful, but I mean, more refined. They're not grotesque looking. They're petite, um, well formed, articulate little features and faces, but they look human like. Whereas the typical gray looks more alien like with the large eyes, big black eyes. Like the more human looking ones don't have that. I don't know if it's because the human looking ones I'm describing are regalians. I don't know enough to say for sure. I can't say I've seen documentation that backs up regalian, anyways, but the one in that autopsy looked more human. And that would line up with this document, which says they looked very human. Now, I'm not a doctor, I've never done an autopsy, and when they took that thing apart, I don't know the difference between human and extraterrestrial organs that much. And what I saw and what I remember from it, I can't say for sure. But it did look human like on the outside, that's for sure. It looked very human like, but just didn't look fully human. That's the thing. Smaller than us, a bigger head, but other than that, mostly the same. I think it had 6 fingers and 6 toes. And maybe they're related to the Greys. I don't know, but they're very different. And Mr. Doty has actually acknowledged that one of the famous alien interviews is real, and he described the one I believe that you know I'm thinking of when he mentions it, and it's one of the gray with the big dark eyes in the little interrogation room with like a little medical thing bleeping next to him, and that one there looks bona fide to me. But that's one of the big-eyed grays, not one of the human face-looking extraterrestrials. So I think this document that I read from is talking about the beings that I saw in that autopsy video. That autopsy video is still out there. You can still see it on the internet. So, and it could very well be that maybe Santilli is telling the truth. Maybe the original did come out, and there could be a lot of people that still have copies of that original. Okay, follow me. And then if his records in the original copy got destroyed, and then he and others or whoever had to replace it and fake it, and only a portion of the original got put back into that fake copy. That doesn't deny the fact that the original copies are still out there, the original copies of the original. right? And many people could have had those and duplicated those a billion times and circulated them. So at any and if Santilli said that the copied version, the staged one, was made so, you know, accurate to the original that one may not be able to tell the difference, then anybody at any given time, including me, may have actually seen the OG original copy. You know what I mean? If you see what I'm getting to. So, and I think it would come down to what your gut instinct would say, because we're talking about something that was made decades ago, before proficient special effects. We've seen the best Hollywood special effects. And if somebody was going to stage something, your gut instinct and our experience with technology and special effects would immediately tell us whether it's, I mean, they could spend tens or hundreds of millions of dollars on a superhero movie or a dinosaur movie. In 2 seconds, we can tell it's CGI. Okay, we could watch the best sci-fi special effects with physical special effects, like models and clay models and this and that, like they did back in the good old 80s, like The Thing and everything, like the best of their kind back then with physical special effects. But if we watch that today, we can immediately tell that it's physical special effects with claymation or makeup and this and that. You follow me? Or robotics. We can always tell the difference. So your gut instinct, if you look at it, you'd be able to tell if you're looking at a real autopsy of a real alien, or if you're looking at some recreation. You know what I mean? Yeah, in a recreation, they could use organs from a butcher shop, and it would look like real gross organs. But you would have to make the alien body. That's the key thing. In the autopsy I seen, the alien body looks dead real. Okay, absolutely dead real. I mean, I would be shocked if somebody faked that. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's enough evidence to show that the aliens are hostile. And like it said in that document, even back then when they'd only known of the aliens for a few years or so, possibly since the 30s at that point, they didn't find any real reason to think that they were going to come to conquest the Earth. So it's probably just for visitation and stuff. So at the end of the day, I don't think we have to fear some great invasion. It would have already happened. And I don't believe these dulce base rumors like in my prior video from today, which puts people into this paranoid conspiracy delusional loop where it just drives you down this dark vortex of self-destruction, where you get caught in these paranoid delusions that aliens and you know the the dark government is reading your mind and putting implants in you, and you start going down the kooky rabbit hole, right? I think at the end of the day, aliens are real, UFOs are real. A few of them over all this 100 years or whatever have crashed. And yeah, obviously, if the UFOs are real and they're flying around, there's hundreds of them, and over decades, you have hundreds of them every year flying around. That's a lot of UFOs. Maybe one or two of them will crash. And the few that have crashed have probably been studied. It would make the most sense. You know what I mean? If people knew about the crash, they would go study them. So I don't think it's rocket science to figure out that, yeah, the governments around the world have probably gotten at least one or two UFOs, and they're trying to back engineer stuff. Um, there was something else from this report. I thought I had read it, but it talks about how they're back engineering one of the engines from the crash site. I thought it was in tech. Let's see. Um, uh, Here's one. Studies at MIT indicate that such a technology is within reach before the decade is out. The apparent use of microcircuitry found at the recovered planoform indicates, and that would be the crashed UFO, the miniaturization, the lower power transmission, light conductor sensitive components are required for interplanetary space travel. Um, there was a point where it's talking about. Hmm, I did read that part. Let's see. No, okay, no, I did. Yeah, I did read it. Where it says they're attempting to duplicate the water drive and plastic core elements found at the engine being kept at blah. Yeah, so I did read that. So they were back engineering. So this document from the 50s talks about a lot of the core elements of the Dulce Enigma that I was talking about in my prior video. That there were, I mean, you have the main backbone to all the UFO lore, which is that UFOs started to crash in the 30s and 40s, and that in America. It's not like they never did in the rest of the world. It's famous that one crashed in Italy in the 30s, and I think even in Bavaria in Germany somewhere. But nonetheless, focusing on in the 40s, a few UFOs crashed in America. They were retrieved, a few bodies were retrieved, and they tried to back engineer the technology. Allegedly, they interviewed some of the aliens, or at least they tried to, for a few years before they each, in their own time, passed away. I mean, this has been the basic core backbone of UFO lore for like 75 years now, since Roswell occurred. Because even back when it occurred, people are sharing these elements of the story. I mean, it's been widespread knowledge since then. Um, and those were allegedly the human looking grays. You shouldn't even call them grays, really, now. That would just be for lack of a better term, but they were the human looking extraterrestrials. And the youthful, you know what I mean? Human looking extraterrestrials. Um, I forgot where I was going with this now, but anyways, I think I've talked enough. The video is going on a bit too long. 35 minutes is long. Actually, that's a lot shorter than I thought it was. Kind of feels like I went into a time warp there. Usually I'm at an hour. When I look up at the clock, it's like I've been talking an hour and it feels like 10 minutes. Now it feels like I've been talking for an hour and it's been 30 minutes. So maybe what I was saying will come back to me before I wrap it up. But um, yeah, whatever. Doesn't really matter. But anyways, folks, everybody take care. I love this topic. It's really cool stuff. And if I find something else interesting, maybe I'll make another video. But I think I'll probably run out of time for tonight. Um, but yeah. Hold up. Oh yeah, the basic backbone of UFOlogy. There we go. The basic knowledge, right? Where those few crashes, they got some aliens. They tried to interview them. Um, they eventually died, unfortunately, and then they tried to back engineer craft. That's the basic gist, right? And that's been there for 75 years, all that information. In the 80s, when the Dulce Enigma package came out, right, which as I was saying in my other videos, a huge disinformation campaign. Oh, welcome, man. Um, yeah, when that huge Dulce Enigma campaign came out, the only thing new that really got added to it was this huge crazy story, which is the delusional paranoid conspiracy that there are reptilians and evil vampiric greys eating, drinking cow blood and raising humans like cattle, like underground, working with the humans and making secret evil contracts with them. Like all of that is complete hogwash, sci-fi, disinformation that was pumped into those things. But everything else talked about in all those documents with all those people involved, right? You have Branton, Tao, the Valerian guy, um, Richard Doty. Then, it even branched off to Lear and Lazar, Thomas Costello, Jason Bishop, the guy named Tao, who is actually Jason Bishop, all these different key figures, and even the Benowitz guy, right? So many people were buzzing around the Dulce Enigma when it came out and spreading that disinformation package when it arrived. But at the end of the day, the disinformation was just there to obscure the basic, simple truths about what was actually occurring. So, and like I tried to say, this is very important because in the Dulce disinformation package is the mythos that the religions were created and the religious figures were literally created by the Greys, the vampire Greys, according to this mythos. Okay, and that they raise us like cattle secretly, and that they created Jesus, and that God is myth and everything, and they created us, and Genesis was about them. Okay, this is very, very dangerous. Okay, it is what fallen angels would want. And without going down that rabbit hole, all I can say is that's a dangerous mythos. But that's what was part of the Dulce Enigma story. And Linda Moulton Howe fell for that, right? And certain other people did. So that's a very dangerous thing. So I urge people to stay away from that belief. Um, but anyways, aside from that, the Dulce Enigma is basically just covering up and covering over with all this nonsense. The basic story, the basic backbone was about these extraterrestrials who we did back up. And I hate to say at the end of the day, I love the idea of aliens and the concept of aliens, but really, at the end of the day, the only real evidence for extraterrestrial species that we have only accounts for three types. Okay? And those three types are ones that look human. And you probably can't even tell the difference. I've heard they just look like they're from a different race that's not on this earth. Okay, or they have a different air about them, a different intelligence to them, like when they talk in their presence, right? But outside of that, they just look human, right? So they could walk amongst us and you would never know, right? The next ones are the little human-like, short, human-faced short ones that I just described, which a lot of people wrongly, I think, call grays. These types here are documented by a lot of different sources and the document that I just read. And you also have the alleged autopsy video that shows one, right? So you have that, that's a pretty well established one. And then outside of that are the grays with the big black eyes, and including the tall ones with the mantis type look to them. So I guess you could say four, right? So you just have four species. There's no documentation that backs up anything about reptilians, unless, as I suggested before, when people first saw these beings, such as the tall grays or other grays, they may have thought that they were like lizards or amphibians or like reptilians. And they may have wrongly or at the time classified them as reptilian, but they're not like lizard men. You know what I mean? They're not like what people think about from sci-fi movies. Like there's no real documentation for that. It's just the tall grays that look kind of mantisy, the short grays with the big black eyes. Then you have the short ones with the human-looking faces. Um, then you have ones that look just like humans. And Richard Doty would add to this, since I classify him as a trustworthy source. He says that there's another race look very human at a distance. When you get closer, they look slightly different in the face, but he says they're just a lot taller and they have like long limbs, right? So, but even still, that's not drastically different. So even though I'm someone who likes sci-fi, I like the idea of aliens, there just aren't that many types out there that really have come to this earth or interact enough. I'm sure that there's other ones out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are. And, maybe even the militaries around the world and the governments have documented them. But from what we know and you have to also keep in mind, the information that the public, little people in the public, me discover, like this document here, these documents might actually be past the 50 or 70 plus years, secrecy level. Like there's a period. I mean, most classifications last for 50 years, and then they can be let out to the public and declassified, right? Or portions still get blacked out and bleeped out, which is why I bleeped out some stuff tonight. And then those portions can get leaked out. That's how the documents get declassified. A lot of the juicy documents I've read that have been declassified legally, you have to go find them, but they've been legally declassified and you're allowed to go view them, right? So it's been so long since these documents, like the one I read from, this is from 1950 something, right? It's probably already declassified information. So it's just shocking that the public is unaware of a lot of these things. But at the end of the day, it's not like it's been kept absolutely secret. Like the people know, little average people like me can know these things if you look for it. You know what I mean? So you don't get to learn about astrophysics unless you go learn about it or take classes on it. Likewise, you don't get to learn about the aliens unless you go looking for it, really, and then you can learn about it. And that's probably how it works, right? But if you're going to wait for things to just plop on your lap and you're not going to go out and look for anything real or juicy, you're just going to fall victim to all these mythos conspiracy stories like the Dulce complex. Anyways, that's enough for my waffling tonight. 43 minutes is too long. Nice to see you again, man. So everybody take care. Check you all later.